The wind didn't howl, it screamed. It tore across the Wyoming plains like a banshee, slamming snow sideways against the cabin walls, rattling loose boards and slipping through cracks like ghost fingers. Inside, Martha Bell shoved another log into the iron stove, her hands raw and red, breath clouding the air. The fire sizzled and spat. It wasn't enough to warm her bones, but it had to do. She pressed her back against the wall and stared into the flames. She'd always hated the quiet after a storm, but this storm didn't seem interested in ending. 3 days now, and it just kept coming. No birds, no coyotes, not even the creak of tree limbs under snow weight. Just white. The kind that blanketed the world and buried anything too stubborn to move. Martha wasn't stubborn. She was surviving. Again. She adjusted the quilt draped over her shoulders and sat at the edge of the table. The lamp flickered. She'd rationed the oil, kept the fire low, dried roots and venison strung up above. She'd made it through worse winters, she reminded herself. But this one felt hungrier. The silence cracked. At first, she thought it was the chimney shifting. Then the horses, but the stables were shut tight and buried in snow. No, this sound came from beyond the porch, a dull thud, like flesh meeting ground. Her hand went to the rifle propped beside the door. She hesitated only a breath before pulling on her coat and pushing into the cold. The storm hit her like a wall. Snow whipped her cheeks, cut through her skirts. She gritted her teeth, eyes narrow slits, moving slow, careful. A few yards out, near the edge of her corral, something lay slumped against the fence. A man, or what was left of one. She approached with the caution of a woman who's buried too many. A brown duster was frozen to his frame, face pale beneath blood and ice. Boots worn down to the stitching. One hand clutched the rail, the other hung limp. His lips moved, her rifle dropped. "God damn it," Martha muttered, crouching beside him. "You picked the wrong night to die, mister." He was barely conscious, mumbling nonsense, something about tracks and fire. No blood from the gut, no smell of rot. That was good. She didn't care who he was, only that he was still breathing. Against her better judgment, and it was better, she pulled him over her shoulder and staggered back to the cabin, boots slipping, lungs burning. Inside, she slammed the door shut with her boot and dropped him near the stove. He groaned. The sound was ugly, desperate. "Don't die on me now," she said, unwrapping his scarf, yanking off his ice-crusted gloves. His face was gaunt, cheeks split from frostbite, a deep gash across his brow. "Idiot," she muttered, rummaging for whiskey and bandages. "Only a fool travels in this mess, or a man running from something." She poured whiskey on a rag and dabbed the cut. He flinched but didn't wake. "No sense waking now," she said softly, working fast. "You'll wish you hadn't." She peeled off his coat, then paused. Pinned to his shirt was a battered brass badge, Cavalry, U.S. Army. Her stomach turned. Military meant trouble. "Of course," she said bitterly. "Why save a farmer or a tinker when I can drag in one of Uncle Sam's bleeding pawns?" Still, she cleaned him up, dressed the wound, and covered him with an extra quilt. He moaned, again, and shifted. Martha leaned against the wall and watched him. The storm kept howling. By midnight he hadn't stirred. She sat near the stove, book in hand, fingers trembling slightly. She hadn't read aloud in a year, but the silence pressed too hard against her thoughts, so she cracked her lips and let the words spill. And though the valley was deep and wide, she crossed it barefoot, carrying only the stone that remembered. Her name. Her voice was steady. The book had belonged to her boy. She could still see his thumbprints on the pages. She looked over. The stranger's eyes were open. He was staring at her with fever-glazed confusion. "You're safe," she said, startled but firm. "Don't move." His brow furrowed. "Where?" "My cabin. You were dying. I brought you in." He tried to sit up. She pushed him back gently. "You'll tear something. Just breathe." His eyes flicked around the room. Fire, walls, her. "Name's Luke," he said hoarsely. She didn't answer. "You saved me?" "I dragged you inside and didn't let you bleed out. Don't confuse it with sainthood." A faint smile. "Suits me fine." She studied him, unsure what to make of the grin. Probably just fever talk. Still, he didn't seem dangerous. Yet. "You Got family? She asked. Anyone looking for you? His eyes darkened. No. She didn't believe him but didn't press. You'll stay here until the storm breaks. After that, you're on your way. I don't plan on staying long. Good. She replied. Don't get used to the fire. He chuckled, then winced. Serves you right, she muttered. Luke drifted off again soon after, chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. Martha leaned back and exhaled. Her cabin felt even smaller now, filled with the sound of someone else breathing. At dawn, she was up before the sun. Snow still fell, but lighter now. She dressed, stepped outside and scanned the plains, nothing but white until she saw it, a rider, far off, just a shadow against the pale horizon. But moving fast, toward town. Martha's gut twisted. Someone had seen her drag Luke in, or saw him lying near the fence. Either way, the gossip train would be galloping. She went back inside, locking the door behind her. By noon, Luke was sitting, upright, sipping broth. He looked stronger, but his eyes kept flicking toward the windows. You expecting trouble? He asked. Always. He smirked, but it faded fast. You trust people? No. That makes two of us. She pulled a chair across from him. Why were you out there? No sane man rides into a snowstorm alone. He hesitated, then shrugged. Orders gone bad. People got shot who shouldn't have. I walked away. She narrowed her eyes. You deserted. Didn't deny it. Not the kind of uniform I wanted to die in. Martha said nothing. She stared at the stove. After a long pause, she whispered, I lost my boy last winter. Fever took him in 3 days. Luke looked down. I'm sorry. He was 10. He loved this book, she said, pointing at the one still open on the table. He nodded, respectful. You can stay till the storm clears, she said. Then you go and you don't tell anyone what you saw here. I owe you that much. You owe me nothing. I don't want favors. I want quiet. Outside, the wind began to ease, but Martha knew it wasn't over. The snow might stop falling, but the real storm was coming from town. They'd seen the rider, heard the whispers. A man in her cabin kept through the night. The same townsfolk, who hadn't lifted a hand when her son was dying, would come now with morals and pitchforks. Luke caught her glance toward the door. You expecting someone? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. No, she said, but they're coming. He didn't ask who. He didn't have to. Instead, he set his empty bowl aside and stood slowly, gripping the back of the chair for balance. Then we better be ready. You're not part of this. I am now. She almost said no. Almost told him to lie low. Let her handle it, but something in his voice, calm, certain, no swagger, made her pause. You shoot? She asked. He nodded. Well enough to owe a few graves. Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. So then finish your soup, deserter. You might need the strength. Luke sat again, rubbing his chest where the bruises had bloomed. She turned toward the window, watching snow swirl through grey light. A figure on horseback crested the far ridge. Martha's grip tightened on the rifle beside the door. This was just the beginning. Martha stood stiff as timber as the rider dismounted. Snow flurried around the figure's bonneted head and stiff wool skirt, and Martha already knew who it was before the woman even knocked. Mrs. Agatha Perkins didn't knock so much as rap, like a schoolmarm scolding the door itself for insolence. She smelled of lavender soap and spite. Martha didn't bother pretending to smile. I saw smoke, Agatha said with tight lips, brushing snow off her shoulders. Thought you might need assistance. Woman alone, middle of a blizzard. Her gaze swept the room like a bayonet. Then it landed on the quilt-draped figure in the corner. Well now, she breathed. Martha moved to block her view, hands crossed. He was near dead when I found him, Martha said, cool and even. Pulled him from the fence line myself. I'm sure you did. The tension sharpened. Agatha's eyes gleamed with something that wasn't concern. Does the Reverend know? She asked. I wasn't aware saving lives needed his permission. Sheltering. A man unrelated to you in your home overnight, with no chaperone. Her lips pinched. It's not just scandalous, Martha. It's unbecoming of a woman trying to rejoin decent society. Martha didn't blink. I wasn't trying to rejoin anything. Mrs. Perkins sniffed like she smelled sin baking in the stove. Luke shifted under the quilt, groaning. His eyes cracked open just enough to meet Agatha's glare. He offered a ghost of a smile and muttered, "Ma'am?" Her nose wrinkled like he'd offered her a rat. "I'll pray for you," she declared, turning to the door. "Both of you." "No need," Martha said. "God's been quiet for some time." The door slammed, and with it, the last illusion of peace. By sundown, Martha spotted a second rider. This one headed not for her cabin, but toward the town proper, no doubt delivering fresh scandal, wrapped in righteous ribbon. She didn't speak much that evening, Luke noticed. "You always this quiet?" "Only when I know what's coming." He leaned back on the cot, face pale but eyes clear now. "That woman looked at me like I was a corpse sitting up." She would have preferred it. He chuckled weakly. Small towns, full of love and hospitality. Martha glanced out the window. The wind had finally stilled, but a new storm had begun, one made of judgment, fueled by gossip. "I buried a husband 5 years back," she said, "then a son. Neither one earned me a lick of kindness from that town. They prefer stories to truth." He nodded. "Stories are easier to control." The next morning, Martha rode to town. She wasn't hiding. That wasn't her way. The streets were still half buried in snowdrifts, but enough folks milled about to turn heads when she dismounted. The sheriff was outside his office, sipping coffee that steamed in the crisp air. He was a bear of a man named Hal McCready, decent. When sober, mean when not. He spotted Martha and tipped his hat. "Bell." "Sheriff. Storm spit a body on your porch? Or are the rumors true?" Martha met his eyes without flinching. He was half frozen. "Would have died if I'd left." "Him?" "Don't doubt it." A pause, then, "Still, you know how folks get." "People were always going to talk," she said. "Now they've got something juicy." Hal scratched his beard. "Could have said something. Asked for help." "I don't need help," she said. "I need them to mind their own business." "That's not how towns work, Martha." "No," she said. "It's how packs work." She left before he could reply. By the time she reached the general store, the whispers had started. Two women near the flour sacks clutched their shawls tighter. A boy giggled behind the counter. Mr. Coble, the storekeeper, wouldn't meet her eyes when she paid for salt and tobacco. Outside, she saw them gathering near the church steps. Reverend Boone, Mrs. Perkins, and a few other townsfolk too bored or bitter to leave well enough alone. It wasn't long before the bell rang, and half the town wandered inside. Martha didn't go in. She already knew what they'd say. She returned home before noon. Luke was sitting upright now, carving something into the wood of the chair with a broken nail. "They talking?" She dropped her bundle onto the table, like hens on cider. "Should I leave?" "Won't matter," she said. "Once the fire's lit, they don't care who holds the match." That night she didn't sleep. The next morning the knock came early. Not a knock exactly, more like the sound of fists that wanted to be hammers. Luke opened his eyes at the noise. "Stay there," she muttered, grabbing the rifle. She opened the door to see 6 people on her porch. Sheriff McCready, Reverend Boone, Mrs. Perkins, and 3 others. All wore the same expression, tight-lipped righteousness with a twist of smug. "Morning," Hal said. "Is it?" He cleared his throat. "There's been a meeting. Folks are concerned." "I'm sure they are." Boone stepped forward, ringing, his hat in his hands. "You've always been a woman of pride, Martha. Strong. But pride can lead a soul astray." Martha's eyebrow arched. "You come to quote scripture or start a sermon on my porch. This situation, this man, you must see how it looks, how it reflects on your soul character." Mrs. Perkins sniffed. "A woman of virtue would never—" "I dragged a dying man in from the snow," Martha snapped. "Next time I'll let God sort him early." "You're alone," Boone said. "No chaperone. He stayed in your home for days. The town—" "Des scandalized. The town should shovel its own walk before it critiques mine." Hal raised a hand. "This doesn't have to be ugly, but folks want closure. They want propriety." "Say what you mean." Boone's voice dropped. "Marry the man, make it right." Martha laughed. The sound was dry as kindling. "You're serious." "You'll be cast out," Agatha said. "Refused service, refused worship. You'll be marked as immoral." "And marrying a stranger cures all that?" Boone nodded. "We already spoke with him. He's agreeable. Martha blinked. You what? He said he would stand by the decision if you agreed. Her blood boiled. She stepped inside without a word. Luke was still on the cot, watching. He didn't look surprised. You agreed, she asked, voice low. I didn't want to cause more trouble. You are the trouble. I'm trying to fix it. By agreeing to own me like I'm cattle. He stood slowly, favoring one leg. That's not what I meant. Her eyes burned. You men always don't mean things right before you ruin someone's life. They gave me a choice. Marry you or get handed over to bounty men for desertion. I figured staying meant I could protect you. I don't need protecting. He met her eyes. Maybe I do. That stopped her cold. A silence stretched between them. Outside, the porch creaked. I'll do it, Martha said loudly, but on one condition. The door creaked open. Name it, said the sheriff. I wear my own dress, and it'll be done here. No church, no town hall. If you want a performance, you can stand in the cold. Macready shrugged. Fair enough. They left her porch quiet again, but inside, something felt colder than any snow. That night, Martha stood by the mirror in her mother's faded wedding dress. The fabric was yellowed, the lace fraying. She stared at herself like a stranger. Luke stood a few feet away, wearing a borrowed coat, hair still damp from a wash. You sure? No, she said, but if they want a show, I'll give them one. She stepped out into the falling snow. The crowd was small but loud in spirit. Reverend Boone cleared his throat. Luke stepped beside her. The ceremony was short. A few words, a few nods. When the Reverend declared them man and wife, Luke didn't try to kiss her. He knew better. Martha turned to go back inside before the echoes of Amen had faded. Back in the warmth, she pulled off the dress and tossed it over, a chair. Luke stood awkwardly by the door. I didn't want this either, he said quietly. She poured herself a drink. But here we are. He looked at her. Do you think they'll leave us alone now? No, she said. They never do. He started to speak, but she waved him off. I need quiet. She sat by the fire. He joined her after a while. Silence. Stretching between them like a crack in glass. Outside, the wind began to rise again, and far off in the dark, hoofbeats echoed. The sky was clear, too clear. Not a cloud in sight, not a wisp of breath from the wind. Martha knew that kind of quiet didn't mean peace. It meant waiting. Something was holding its breath. She was up early, splitting kindling behind the cabin. The wedding had been 2 days. Ago. She hadn't spoken to Luke much since, not out of spite, just necessity. The words weren't ready yet, and she wasn't the sort to speak out of obligation. If he'd noticed her silence, he hadn't said a word about it. That morning she heard the sharp clack of boots on the porch, not heavy like the sheriff's, not light like a preacher's, something else, measured, confident. She wiped sweat from her brow, grabbed the rifle leaning near the shed, and stepped into the clearing. 3 men stood there, all dust and trail grime, long coats, spurs that didn't jingle. Their horses were winded, tied lazily to a post they hadn't asked to use. The man in front had a scar that curved from his left temple to the edge of his mouth, like someone had tried to carve the smirk off him and missed. "Morning, ma'am," the scarred man said. His voice was smooth but bored, like he was already imagining the next town over. "Looking for a fella named Luke Carver. Rode this direction, maybe 4 days back. You seen him?" Martha didn't blink. Plenty of men passed through. Storm. Came up sudden. Anyone out there's buried under a dozen feet by now. The man's head tilted bird-like. That a no? That's a no. Behind her, the cabin door creaked. Luke stood in the shadowed frame, hair unkempt, hand at his side, where the pistol usually sat. The other 2 men shifted slightly. The scarred man smiled. "Well now," he said. "Ain't that convenient?" Martha stepped sideways, blocking their view. "You boys got names?" "We do," the man said, "but they're the kind best left out of polite company. Let's just say we're here on a matter of unfinished business, Mr. Carver, and some decisions he made." Martha didn't lower the rifle. "He's not going anywhere." The man's smile faded a fraction. "That so?" "That's so." Luke stepped forward then, past her, his voice low. "Martha." She didn't move. "I need to talk to them. Like hell you do. I mean it." He gently rested a hand on the barrel of her rifle, pushing it just enough to break the aim. "I've got this." She stared at him for a moment, then stepped back. Luke turned to the three strangers. "You got what you came to say it. But you don't touch her. You don't step past that fence." The scarred man's smile came back. "Ain't interested in her. This is between you and the law." "You know what happens to deserters, Luke?" Luke didn't flinch. "Yeah, I do. You left a colonel with a hole in his throat and 2 witnesses dead." Luke's jaw twitched. "That colonel ordered his men to torch a village full of women and children. Said they were harboring outlaws. There were no outlaws there, just farmers. And one old woman that tried to hand me bread." "You know what they call that in uniform?" the man asked. Luke nodded. "Disobedience." The man pointed a gloved hand at him. "Treason. Court-martial's too kind. They sent us to collect." "You, Luke, dead or alive?" Martha stepped forward again. "Try it." The man looked her up and down, amused. "You sure about that?" She didn't blink. "Try it and see." Something passed between them, an unspoken dare, razor-edged. Then the scarred man chuckled. "Ain't today, sweetheart. We'll let you 2 newlyweds enjoy your cabin for another night, but we'll be back with more. You bought him some time, but not a pardon." They remounted, turned, and rode back, toward the hills without another word. Martha didn't lower the rifle until they were specks on the horizon. Inside, Luke poured himself water with trembling hands. He sat at the edge of the table, elbows on knees, head bowed. "You should have told me," she said. "I figured I wouldn't make it through the storm." "You didn't," he smiled without humor. "Fair. I don't like being blindsided." No." She sat across from him. The silence was heavier now, but more honest. "You think they'll really come back?" she asked. "Yeah, not just those 3. They'll bring others." Martha leaned back. "Then we prepare." "You mean run?" "I mean dig in," Luke blinked. "You'd fight for me after all this?" "I didn't marry you to save face," she said. "But now that they've made it real, I'll be damned if I let someone take my husband off my land in a pine box." Luke let out a soft, stunned breath. "Hell!" She stood, already pulling down her hunting traps from the wall. "Let's make the welcome real unfriendly." They spent the rest of the day setting up, barbed wire in the brush near the corral, broken bottles buried neck up near the windows. They nailed planks over the back entry and dug shallow trenches near the shed. They didn't talk much, the work was their conversation. By nightfall, they were both covered in dirt and sweat, but the place looked less like a cabin and more like a last stand. That night, over a shared bottle of rye, Luke finally asked, "Why are you doing this?" Martha stared into the fire. "Because I've buried too many good men, and because I'm tired of people thinking a woman out here can't make her own choices." He nodded slowly. "And me? What choice are you making?" She didn't answer. Right away, finally, she said, "I don't hate you, that's a start." They sat in silence, firelight flickering across their faces. The next day was too quiet. Even the crows kept their distance. Around noon, Martha spotted the dust cloud in the distance. 8 riders. Not bounty men anymore, hired guns, the kind that didn't ask questions or leave witnesses. She didn't say a word, just handed Luke a rifle. They took their positions, Martha on the roof, Luke crouched near the window with a view of the front approach. The riders came slow, deliberate, letting the sound of hooves fill the air like a war drum. Then the leader called out, "It was the scarred man again. You sure about this, Luke? You gonna die for your pride?" "No," Luke said, stepping into view. "I'm gonna kill for my freedom," the man laughed. "Well, ain't that poetic?" And then the shooting started. Martha dropped the first one with a clean shot to the chest. Luke took out another through the gut. The others scattered, fanning out behind trees and brush, firing wild. Bullets tore through the front window. Wood splinters flew. Martha rolled across the roof, reloading, breath sharp in her lungs. Luke returned fire, ducking low. One of the hired guns made a break for the side, trying to flank. Martha nailed him mid-stride. Smoke filled the cabin. The heat of gunpowder, the metallic taste of fear, it all swirled into one breathless haze. Another rider charged the porch. Luke stepped out and shot him point-blank. But then something snapped, a shot rang out, and Luke dropped to his knees. "Luke!" Martha scrambled down, heart pounding, slipping through the side door. He was bleeding from the arm, trying to reload. "I'm fine," he grunted. She helped him up, dragging him behind the table. "We can't stay inside," he said. "They'll burn it!" "They won't get the chance." She grabbed the lantern from the mantel, opened the side window, and threw it hard. Flames erupted across the front yard where they'd soaked oil earlier. The fire caught fast, creating a wall of smoke and heat that forced the remaining riders back. Two tried to ride around. Martha grabbed Luke's revolver and met them at the side. She shot one through the throat, and Luke, despite his wound, took down the last with a shot that cracked across the plains like thunder. Then it was quiet. Only the sound of burning oil, groaning horses, and the hiss of blood on snow. Martha walked slowly through the yard, checking bodies. No one stirred. The beer. Scarred man lay near the corral, coughing blood. She stood over him. "You were right," he wheezed. "She's a real storm." Martha said nothing. He laughed once, then went still. By sunset, the flames had died. Martha helped Luke inside, tore strips from her apron, and bound his arm. "You should rest," she said. "So should you." "I will." They sat beside each other, leaning against the wall, exhausted. Luke broke the silence. "I never meant to bring this to your door." "I know. I just wanted to vanish." "You didn't." She looked at him, eyes soft now, the hard edge dulled. "You're part of this place now," she said. "For better or worse," he nodded. "I'll take it." They didn't speak after that. Just listened to the wind brushing through the trees, the sound of a world still turning. Outside, night fell heavy and cold, but inside the cabin, the fire burned warm. Dawn broke slow and grey over the plains, dragging long shadows across blood-stained snow. The cabin stood silent, battered and soot-smudged, but standing. Smoke curled from the stovepipe like a surrender flag made of warmth. Inside, Martha moved with quiet purpose, gathering what supplies remained, restocking ammo, stitching new cloth over the window holes. Luke sat at the table, his wounded arm now bound in clean linen, watching her work. His face was drawn, lips cracked, but his eyes had changed, no longer hunted, no longer drifting. There was something rooted in him now. He belonged to the moment. "I never asked," he said finally, breaking the hush. "Why did you really pull me out of the snow?" She didn't stop tying the bandage knots on a satchel. "Because I didn't want another ghost on my land." He nodded then, "But you let me stay." Martha glanced at him. "You stayed quiet, didn't touch anything that wasn't yours. You listened. That's rare in a man." He smirked, but it faded. "I don't want to bring more trouble. You didn't bring it," she said, slinging the satchel over her shoulder. "The world's full of it already. You just pulled the mask off." She walked to the door, rifle slung across her back, and paused. "They'll send more." "I know. They'll come louder this time, bigger. Real soldiers, not bounty hunters." She turned, arms folded. "Then I stopped being just a widow with a gun." Luke stood. He winced, but didn't show weakness. "I'm not leaving." Martha's eyes didn't soften. "Didn't ask you to." They spent the next hours preparing the land like it was a living thing that needed armor. They reinforced the trenches, buried jars filled with black powder beneath frost-hardened dirt, and rigged the barn doors with traps that would trigger if kicked. Martha's motions were swift and practiced. Luke worked beside her, slower, careful, with his arm but determined. That night, over fire-roasted meat and boiled coffee, they spoke in short, meaningful bursts. No poetry, just the truth. "I was 17 when I left Georgia," Luke said, voice low. "Thought a uniform meant something. Thought killing bad men would make me a good one." Martha leaned back, staring at the ceiling beams. "I was 16 when I married. Thought it'd stop the whispers. It didn't. Then I had my boy. For a while that was enough. Then sickness took him and the town didn't even bring a plate of food. Just condolences wrapped in pity." Luke stared at her. "That's why you fight." "I fight," she said, "because every time I didn't, someone else paid the price." They didn't speak for a while after that. Words were too small for the silence they shared. The next morning the dust rose early. before the sun had finished warming the frost. Luke spotted it from the lookout perch above the barn. 3 riders at first, then 5 more, then wagons, then cavalry colors. He dropped to the floor, face grim. Companies arrived. Martha didn't ask how many. She didn't need the number. The sound of wheels crunching through icy gravel was loud enough. When the soldiers reached the edge of the property, Martha stood on her porch, rifle in hand. Luke at her side. The lead rider, a tall man in full military regalia, dismounted with practiced ease. He didn't remove his gloves. That was telling. "Mrs. Bell," he called. She didn't answer. "I am Major Crowder. I'm here to collect. A fugitive of the United States Cavalry. He goes by the name Luke Carver. I believe he's inside your home." Martha spat into the snow. "He's right here." Crowder raised a brow. "That simplifies things." "Does it?" The major's lips tightened. "This is a matter of military justice." Martha's voice was calm, measured. "Then take it to a court, not to my doorstep with rifles and threats." Luke stepped forward. "I deserted. I admit it. But I did it because I was ordered to kill unarmed civilians. I refused. You can hang me for that if you want, but don't pretend it makes you just." Crowder didn't blink. "The law isn't always just, Carver. Sometimes it's just necessary." "I've had enough of necessary men," Martha said. "You come for him, you walk through me." Crowder sighed. "This doesn't need to be bloodshed." "Then turn around." The major signaled. Soldiers fanned out, boots crunching, rifles aimed. Luke whispered, "Martha—" "No," she said. "No more running." A shot cracked. Not from the soldiers, from Martha. The blast hit the dirt inches from Crowder's feet. He didn't flinch. "Last chance." "No," she said again. Everything exploded. Gunfire lit the air like fireworks. Martha dove behind the woodpile, her rifle already cocked. Luke grabbed the pistol from his belt, shooting from behind a trough. Bullets tore through the porch beams, splinters flying. A soldier went down near the well, blood soaking into snow. The barn doors blew outward with a roar. One of the traps had triggered, sending flames and shrapnel into the advancing flank. Horses screamed, panicked, pulling at their reins. Martha moved like a storm, firing, reloading, firing again. No hesitation, no fear. Luke took a bullet to the leg, but didn't go down. He crawled behind a rain barrel and kept firing. One soldier charged the cabin door. Martha met him with the butt of her rifle, cracking his jaw, then shooting him point blank as he dropped. Smoke thickened. Yells turned to screams. Martha moved through it all like a shadow. She didn't see faces, just threats, silhouettes, movement. The sound of Luke's gun, even wounded, never stopped. Then it was quiet. Just wind. A soft groan. The creak of a broken wagon wheel. Martha stepped into the clearing, breathing hard. Bodies lay scattered. A few soldiers staggered away, dragging wounded comrades. Major Crowder was among them, bleeding from a wound in his thigh, supported by another man. "You should have walked away," Martha said. Crowder looked at her, wild-eyed. You're insane." She didn't argue. She just watched as he was hauled onto a wagon and driven off. No one tried to fight anymore. As the last of them disappeared over the ridge, Martha lowered her rifle. Her hands trembled, but only slightly. Luke limped toward her, legs soaked in red, but still upright. She caught him before he could fall. "Thought you said you didn't need protecting," he said through gritted teeth. "I don't." He smiled faintly. "You saved me anyway." Martha helped him inside, laid him down, stitched the wound herself. Her hands were steady now, efficient. When it was done, she collapsed into the chair beside the stove. For the first time in days, the land outside was still. "You know they'll send more," Luke said softly. "I know." "How are you going to keep fighting?" Martha looked at the cracked walls, the bullet holes, the burn scars in the wood. And then she looked at him. "I'm not fighting for you anymore," she said. He blinked. "I'm fighting for us." The words hit. Like a hammer, solid, unexpected, final. Luke exhaled. "You really mean that?" She nodded. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, gentle now, like it was tired too. They sat there side by side, broken but breathing, wrapped in a silence that no longer felt empty. Later, as the stars rose above the still land, Martha stood at the doorway watching the horizon. The firelight danced behind her. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. Her storm had passed, and she'd weathered it, not because she was alone, but because she'd chosen to stand, and someone had finally chosen to stand with her.